They decided which child deserved to suffer. I worked 3 jobs. My sister got a free ride. At Dad's funeral, I found out they were millionaires. Original post. I'm writing this from my childhood bedroom, sitting on the same twin mattress I slept on for 18 years. The same mattress I begged my parents to replace when I was 16 because the springs were digging into my back. "We can't afford a new one," my mother said. "Learn to be grateful for what you have." I'm looking at that mattress differently now. My father died 6 days ago. Heart attack. He was 67 years old, still working at the hardware store where he'd been employed for over 30 years. He never retired because we need the income. My mother still clips coupons, still buys generic brands, still wears clothes from thrift stores. I thought I understood my life. I thought I understood my family. I was wrong about everything. The funeral was small. My father wasn't a social man. A few co-workers, some neighbors, my mother's church friends. My younger sister flew in from Seattle, where she works as a marketing director for a tech company. I drove 4 hours from my apartment in the city because I couldn't afford to take time off work and fly. After the service, after the casseroles and the condolences and the endless handshakes, a man in a gray suit approached me. I'd noticed him at the back of the church but assumed he was someone from my father's work. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said, handing me a business card. "I'm your parents' estate attorney. We need to discuss your inheritance. Can you come by my office tomorrow morning?" I almost laughed. Inheritance. My parents had nothing to inherit. We'd grown up in a small 2-bedroom house in a working-class neighborhood. My father drove a 15-year-old pickup truck. My mother had never worked outside the home because we couldn't afford childcare anyway. I figured the lawyer wanted to discuss the house, maybe some small life insurance policy. I said I'd be there. I wish I hadn't gone. I wish I still didn't know. The attorney's office was nicer than I expected. Leather chairs. Mahogany desk. The kind of office that charges by the hour and doesn't apologize for it. He asked me to sit. Offered me water. Then he opened a folder and began speaking in that careful, measured tone that lawyers use when they're about to change your life. "Your father left detailed instructions for the distribution of his estate," he said. "The majority goes to your mother, of course. But there's a significant portion designated specifically for you." I nodded, expecting to hear about a few $1,000s. Maybe enough to cover the time I'd taken off work. "The amount designated for you is $4.2 million. I didn't understand the words at first. They didn't fit together in any way that made sense. "I'm sorry," I said. "Can you repeat that?" $4,200,000. It's currently held in various investment accounts. Your father was quite financially savvy. He grew a substantial inheritance from your grandfather over the past 40 years. My knees buckled. I actually felt them give way, and I gripped the arm of the chair to stay upright. "That's not possible," I said. "My parents were poor. We were always poor." The lawyer's expression shifted slightly. Something like pity crossed his face. "I'm afraid that's not accurate," he said. "Your parents have been quite wealthy for most of your life. Your grandfather left them a substantial sum when you were 3 years old. They chose to live modestly." Chose. He kept talking. Something about tax implications and transfer procedures and documents I'd need to sign. I wasn't listening. I was doing math in my head. Calculating years. Calculating suffering. I worked 3 jobs to pay for college. I ate ramen for years. I graduated with $60,000 in debt. They had $4.2 million the entire time. Update 1. 2 days later. I confronted my mother last night. I waited until my sister went to bed because I didn't want an audience. I didn't want to perform my pain for anyone. She was in the kitchen, washing dishes by hand even though there's a dishwasher. "Saves on the water bill," she always said. Another lie. Another performance of poverty that never existed. "I talked to the lawyer," I said. She didn't turn around. Her hands kept moving in the soapy water. "I know about the money. All of it. I know you've been millionaires since I was a toddler." She turned off the water then. Dried her hands slowly on a faded dish towel. When she finally faced me, her expression wasn't guilty. It wasn't apologetic. It was proud. "Your father wanted to wait until you were older to tell you," she said. "We were going to explain everything eventually." "Explain what?" "Explain why you let me work myself half to death while you had millions in the bank." She sat down at the kitchen table, gestured for me to join her. I remained standing. "You don't understand," she said. We watched so many families ruined by money. My own brother, your Uncle Richard, he inherited money at 22 and never worked a day in his life. Died of an overdose at 40. Your father's cousin got a trust fund and gambled it all away. We saw what easy money did to people. So you decided to lie to me for 29 years? We decided to raise you right. Her voice was firm now. Certain. Look at who you've become. You're hardworking. You're humble. You're appreciative of everything you have. Rich kids are spoiled and entitled. We gave you the greatest gift, struggle. The greatest gift. I thought about the nights I went hungry in college because I had to choose between eating and paying rent. The weekends I spent working doubles at the restaurant instead of studying, watching my grades slip because I couldn't afford tutoring. The summer I couldn't take an internship in my field because it was unpaid and I needed income to survive. You don't get to choose someone else's suffering, I said. You don't get to decide that I needed to struggle and then call it a gift. Everything we did was for your benefit. I missed Grandma's funeral. She stopped talking. Your mother. Your own mother's funeral. Do you remember why I wasn't there? I saw something flicker in her eyes. Something like shame, quickly suppressed. I was 22, working 2 jobs. I told you I couldn't afford the flight, and you said you understood. You said we'd visit her grave together someday. You could have bought me a ticket. You had millions of dollars, and you could have bought me a $300 plane ticket so I could say goodbye to my grandmother. We didn't want to. You chose not to. There's a difference. You made a choice, and I missed burying the woman who used to sneak me candy because she knew you wouldn't buy me any. I never got to say goodbye because you decided my character was more important than my grief. My mother pressed her lips together. Your grandmother would have understood. She raised your father the same way. Then she was wrong too. I left the kitchen. I couldn't look at her anymore. 29 years of memories were rearranging themselves in my head, every hardship recontextualized, every "we can't afford it" revealed as a deliberate choice to let me suffer. Update 2, 5 days later. I've been going through old documents. Photo albums. Tax returns my father kept filed in meticulous folders in his home office. I wanted to understand the full scope of what they'd hidden. The money came from my grandfather when I was 3. Not a fortune by today's standards, about $600,000, but my father invested it carefully. Consistently. For 40 years. Compound interest did the rest. They could have helped me at any point. When I was 16 and wanted to take SAT prep classes, they said they couldn't afford it. When I was 17 and needed a car to get to my after-school job, they said I'd have to buy my own. When I was 18 and desperately wanted to go to the state university that had offered me partial admission, they said community college was the only option because we don't have college fund money. I found receipts from that year. They donated $15,000 to their church building fund. While I was being told we couldn't afford my education, they were giving money to build a new fellowship hall. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is my sister. She came to me yesterday, concerned because I'd been distant. I hadn't been distant. I'd been investigating. And what I found made me sick. Did you know? I asked her. About the money. She's always been a terrible liar. I watched her face cycle through surprise, confusion, and then a guilty settling. They told me when I was in college, she admitted. They made me promise not to tell you. They paid for your college. It wasn't a question. I'd already seen the bank statements. 4 years at a private university, fully funded. No loans. No debt. They said you were different, she said quietly. They said you were strong enough to do it on your own. They said I wasn't. They looked at their 2 children and decided which one deserved to suffer. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like. Tell me how they decided that I should work 3 jobs and eat ramen and graduate with $60,000 in debt while you got a free ride. Tell me how that's anything other than choosing to make one child suffer while protecting the other. She started crying. I felt nothing. They bought you a car, I continued. A nice one. When you graduated. I remember being at your graduation party, watching you unwrap the keys. I was so happy for you. I didn't even think about how unfair it was because I thought they genuinely couldn't afford to help me. They thought it would make you resentful if you knew. I am resentful. But I'm not resentful because you had it easier than me. I'm resentful because they lied. Because they could have helped me, and they chose not to. Because every time I called home exhausted and broken and asking if they could please, just this once, help me with rent or groceries or textbooks, they said no. Not because they didn't have it. Because they decided my suffering was educational. My sister tried to hug me. I stepped back. "You've known for 8 years," I said. "You watched me struggle for 8 more years after they told you the truth, and you never said anything. They made me promise. And you kept that promise. You chose their secret over my well-being. That's something you'll have to live with." I packed my bag that night and got a hotel room. I couldn't stay in that house anymore. Update 3, 2 weeks later. I've been back in my apartment for a week now. The money hasn't transferred yet. There's paperwork and tax implications, and the lawyer assures me everything is proceeding normally. But I've had time to think. Too much time. My mother has called 17 times. I haven't answered. She's left voicemails that range from concerned to defensive to angry. In the last one, she said I was being ungrateful, and that your father would be devastated to see you acting this way. My father, who kept this secret for 29 years, who watched me work myself into exhaustion and said, "This will make you stronger," who died thinking he'd done the right thing. I keep coming back to specific memories, the ones that hurt the most. There was a school trip in 8th grade, a week-long science camp that cost $400. Everyone in my class was going. I begged my parents for months. They said they'd try to make it work. 2 days before the trip, my mother sat me down and said they just couldn't swing it. I pretended to be sick that week so I didn't have to explain to my classmates why I was the only one not going. $400. They had millions. There was the time I got pneumonia in college and couldn't afford to see a doctor. I let it get so bad that I ended up in the emergency room with a $4,000 bill that I'm still paying off. I was 20 years old and drowning in medical debt while my parents had an investment portfolio most people only dream of. There was the apartment I lived in my last year of college. A studio with a window that didn't close properly and a mold problem in the bathroom. I developed respiratory issues that I still deal with today. I lived there because it was $300 a month, and that was all I could afford while working 3 jobs and taking a full course load. They could have helped. They could have made my life easier without making it easy. There's a difference between raising a spoiled child and preventing your son from living in squalor. They chose squalor. They chose struggle. They chose to watch me suffer and called it love. Mom said they gave me the gift of struggle. I wanted to scream. You don't get to choose someone else's suffering and call it a gift. You don't get to engineer hardship for your child and pretend it's parenting. Update 4. 1 month later. The money finally transferred. $4.2 million, sitting in an account with my name on it. I looked at the balance for a long time, trying to feel something other than rage. Here's what I've decided to do. First, I paid off my student loans. All $47,000 remaining, I'd managed to pay down $13,000 over 6 years of monthly payments. The relief I expected didn't come. Instead, I felt the weight of every payment I'd made, every sacrifice, every meal I'd skipped to make sure that check cleared. Then I paid off my medical debt, the emergency room visit, the follow-up appointments I'd put off for years, a crown I needed on a cracked tooth that I'd been ignoring because dental work isn't covered by my insurance. I paid off my car, which I bought used and have been making payments on for 3 years. I put 6 months of expenses in a high-yield savings account, an emergency fund, the kind of safety net I never had growing up. And then I did something that surprised even me. I contacted a non-profit that helps first-generation college students, the ones whose parents can't, or won't, help them pay for school. I told them I wanted to establish a scholarship fund, a significant one, enough to help students cover tuition, books, housing, enough to let them focus on their education instead of working 3 jobs to survive. The woman I spoke with was surprised by the amount. She asked if I was sure. "I'm sure," I said. "I know what it's like to struggle through college alone. I don't want anyone else to feel that way if I can help it." I donated $500,000 to start the fund, with plans to add more over time. I'm calling it the Second Chance Scholarship, because that's what it is, a chance for students to have the support I never did. The irony isn't lost on me. My parents thought struggle built character. Maybe it does. But it also builds exhaustion. It builds resentment. It builds health problems and mental health issues and a bone-deep sense of insecurity that never quite goes away. I don't want to build character through suffering. I want to build opportunity through support. Update 5. 2 months later. My mother found out about the scholarship fund. I don't know how. Maybe my sister told her. Maybe she has Google alerts set up for my name. She called me at work, angrier than I've ever heard her. You're giving away your father's money to strangers? I stepped into a conference room and closed the door. It's my money now, I said. The lawyer was very clear about that. Your father worked his whole life to build that for our family. He worked his whole life pretending to be poor while I actually was poor. Don't talk to me about what he built. We raised you to be better than this. To be grateful, to be humble. You raised me to think I was worth less than my sister. You raised me to believe I didn't deserve help. You raised me to struggle alone while you had the means to ease my suffering and chose not to. Everything we did was for your own good. Then why didn't you do it for her? I was shouting now. I couldn't help it. Why did Sarah get a free ride and I got poverty? Why did she deserve a car and I deserved to walk 3 miles to work in the winter? Why was I strong enough to suffer and she wasn't? Silence. Then, quietly, Sarah needed more support. She's always been more delicate. She's always been more loved. My mother started to cry. I felt a twist of something in my chest. Guilt, maybe, or the conditioned response of decades of being taught that my mother's tears were my responsibility to fix. I pushed through it. I'm not going to pretend this is okay, I said. I'm not going to thank you for the gift of struggle or tell you that I understand why you did it. You made choices. Deliberate choices. For 29 years. And now I'm making mine. What does that mean? It means I'm done. I don't want to see you. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to hear your justifications or your apologies or your explanations. I'm your mother. You were my mother when you watched me go hungry and did nothing. You were my mother when you chose to let me suffer. You don't get to use that title now like it means something. I hung up. Sarah called 3 hours later. She'd talked to our mother. She was furious. You can't just cut her off, she said. She's grieving. She just lost her husband. And I just lost the illusion that my parents loved me as much as they loved you. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk to me about fair? I laughed, and it sounded bitter even to my own ears. You had everything handed to you. College. A car. Support. Security. I had nothing. I had less than nothing. I had the constant, crushing pressure of poverty that didn't need to exist. They were trying to help you. They were trying to control me. They were trying to shape me into whatever they thought I should be, and they did it by taking away any choice I had. That's not help. That's manipulation. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then, I think you're being cruel. Mom is alone now. Dad is dead. And you're abandoning her. She watched me suffer for 29 years when she could have helped. She made a choice. So did I. So you're just going to throw away your family over money? It's not about the money. It was never about the money. It's about trust. It's about love. It's about looking at 2 children and deciding that one deserves to struggle and one doesn't. I'm not throwing away my family. They threw me away a long time ago. They just forgot to tell me. I hung up on her too. Final update, 3 months later. I've been in therapy. My therapist says I'm processing significant developmental trauma masked as normative parenting. She says my parents' behavior, while probably well-intentioned, was a form of financial and emotional abuse. She says the complicated mix of grief and rage I feel is normal and valid. I don't know if I believe her yet. Some days I think my parents were monsters. Other days I think they were just flawed people who read the wrong parenting books and took bad advice too far. Most days I feel both things at once. Here's what I know. I'm not poor anymore. For the first time in my life, I have financial security. I have a cushion. I have the ability to get sick without worrying about medical bills, to take a vacation, to buy things without doing complicated mental math first. But wealth doesn't erase poverty. The scarcity mindset is still there. I still check prices before buying groceries. I still feel guilty when I eat at a nice restaurant. I still wake up sometimes at 3 a.m., convinced that I've forgotten to pay a bill that will ruin me. The money sits in my accounts, and I don't know what to do with most of it. The scholarship fund is growing. I've paid off my debts. I'm slowly, carefully, trying to learn what it means to not be afraid all the time. My mother sends letters now since I won't answer her calls. Long letters about how much she and my father loved me, about how everything they did was for my own good, about how she hopes I'll understand someday. I read them. I don't respond. My sister and I don't talk much anymore. She thinks I'm being vindictive. Maybe she's right. Or maybe there's just no relationship left to salvage. We were raised as different classes of children, And that inequality poisoned everything between us before we even knew it existed. Dad died thinking he'd done the right thing. Mom still believes it. And I have $4.2 million that feels like blood money, compensation for a childhood I can't get back, for suffering that didn't need to happen, for years of struggle that were engineered by the people who were supposed to protect me. Someone in the comments of my last update said I should forgive them. That holding on to anger only hurts me. That they were doing their best. Maybe their best wasn't good enough. Maybe love isn't enough when it comes wrapped in deliberate hardship. Maybe intentions don't matter when the impact is a lifetime of trauma. I'm working on the anger. My therapist says it's a process. She says someday I might be able to look at my childhood with something other than rage. I'm not there yet. But I'm trying. And I'm using some of the money to make sure other kids don't have to go through what I did. Every scholarship recipient I help is a reminder that support doesn't spoil people, it lifts them up. Every student who doesn't have to work 3 jobs to survive college is proof that my parents were wrong. I'm not poor anymore. But I'll never forget what it felt like. And I'll never forgive them for choosing to let me feel it. Some people build character through struggle. I'm trying to build something better, a world where struggle isn't the only option. TLDR, found out at my father's funeral that my parents had $4.2 million the entire time I was growing up, poor and struggling. They did it on purpose, to build character. They also paid for my sister's college and bought her a car because she wasn't as strong. I've taken the inheritance, cut off my mother, and started a scholarship fund to help students who are actually struggling. My sister thinks I'm cruel. I think I'm finally free. Here's what I learned about character building. You don't get to choose someone else's suffering and call it a gift. I worked 3 jobs to pay for college. I ate ramen for years. I graduated with $60,000 in debt. They had $4.2 million the entire time. I found out at my father's funeral. The lawyer said a number that made my knees buckle. My parents had been millionaires since I was 3 years old. They chose to live poor. They chose to raise me poor. To build character. Mom said they gave me the gift of struggle. I wanted to scream. I missed my grandmother's funeral because I couldn't afford a $300 flight. They had millions. They chose not to help. Then I discovered the worst part. They paid for my sister's college. Bought her a car. Because she wasn't as strong. They looked at their 2 children and decided which one deserved to suffer. I took the money. Paid off my debts. And then I did something that surprised even me. I started a scholarship fund. $500,000 to help students who are actually struggling. Who don't have parents choosing to let them suffer. My sister called me cruel for cutting off our mother. I said, she watched me suffer for 29 years when she could have helped. She made a choice. So did I. Dad died thinking he'd done the right thing. Mom still believes it. And I have $4.2 million that feels like blood money. I'm not poor anymore. But I'll never forget what it felt like. And I'll never forgive them for choosing to let me feel it. Some people build character through struggle. I'm trying to build something better, a world where struggle isn't the only option.